Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Manon Bolliger, a retired and deregistered naturopathic physician with 30 plus years of experience. Here you will discover engaging and informative conversations between experienced healers, covering all aspects of healing, the personal journey, the journey of the practitioner, and the amazing possibilities for our own body and spirit.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I'm with Aeryon from Aeryon Wellness. It's Aeryon Ashlie. And she's actually almost a neighbor of mine. We're both speaking from Vancouver. And she's going to discuss a little bit her whole journey with wellness and with eating disorders, and as well her 5 pillars of wellness, I guess, Aeryon Wellness. So I'm really excited to interview you today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. We are neighbors. We definitely could be waving across. I think you're downtown. I'm in Kitts. We could wave.
Yep. I'm in Chinatown. Right.
Oh, there we go. Close.
So, well, I guess maybe, the significant part too is that at least I feel that often we come across our healing path and what we have to offer from having gone through it on some level ourselves. And you have quite the journey. So I thought maybe we could spend a few minutes, explaining that and the challenges you had, because so many people have these challenges.
Yeah, I think
where to turn.
No, for sure. For sure. I mean, I was raised in a household where my mom was a figure skating coach and my dad was a bodybuilder, and a non-competitive bodybuilder, but nonetheless. So athletics and aesthetics were always a really important part of our household growing up. And in that, I struggled with weight. I was quite an overweight child. When I look back now, it's funny. In hindsight, I'm like, I wasn't that overweight, but I was teased relentlessly. And so much so my parents actually homeschooled me for a number of years. And when I was about 13, they thought of a solution was to put me in Weight Watchers. And, now my mom, who's a counselor, looks back and she's just mortified with her decision. But that also, we chronicled my journey in my book called Bulimia to Balance. And so we worked through so much of that in that process. But at 13, they put me into Weight Watchers. And I remember sitting in that room of 30-year-old plus women and feeling not enough and too much, kind of all in the same time. And it was shortly after that, a classmate of mine, his sister struggled with eating disorders, and he told me about what she was going through. And in my little 13-year-old brain, I went, oh, that sounds like the best way to do this. And so that really is what started my battle with bulimia that ended up being 25 years. Wow. In my later teens or my early 20s, I started doing fitness competitions. And I competed for 13 years, and that became a glorified eating disorder for me. I was praised for looking as shredded as possible, and everybody was, in amazement. However, the day the show would end, I'd fall back into that bulimic tendency. And that continued on for 13 years. And the only time I didn't struggle with it when I was competing. So I would compete 4 to 5 times a year. So I was constantly always in this prep mode, right? And always battling my body and always really struggling with food. In that time as well, I was on hormonal birth control. So all of this kind of sums up to my health crisis that happened about 10 years ago. And so about 10, 11 years ago now, I still was kind of in the throes of it, trying to really work through it. And I kind of had another episode. I went upstairs, and the difference this time was my 3-year-old knocked at the door. And as I rose up, I looked at my reflection. I was like, if I don't get a hold of this, she'll follow the same footsteps. She'll have issues with food. She'll have issues with her body and exercise. And so at that point, I really made a commitment to start working on what true holistic health meant to me. And it no longer became the size of my pants and how much I was working out or how much macros I was having every day. It really started to look at more closely into cognitive behavioral therapy. I started working with counselors. I started really looking at the thoughts that were really inhabiting my brain every day that surrounded food and my body and who I wanted to be in the world. And so it took me a couple of years, and I worked through all that. And then at the same time, I had been working in the vitamin industry for almost 13 years. I had an award-winning career as a vitamin salesperson. And every day I sold vitamins that were, created by men and in the male dominated retail space and packaged up and marketed to women. And less than 5% of supplement companies are owned by women. And I was packaged out by this company, and I had all of these other pillars. So I'll talk about the pillars, but all the pillars that I had come to with my holistic journey of healing. And then the one thing that was kind of missing was the supplement end of things. Having supplements are really designed for women by women. And when I got packaged out, I rolled the dice and took the money that I was given for my package, and I opened my brand, Aeryon Wellness. So I started my own supplement company, and we're a female-focused supplement company. We are the only female-focused, 100% female-owned company in Canada. There is nobody else but us, or me, which is really neat. And we continue to look at ways in which we can support women creating innovative new products, but also to support them with the 5 pillars that I have used for my own healing journey, because it's not just supplements, right? It really is. The 5 pillars of the brand, I'll kind of tell you them quickly, but the 5 pillars are the thoughts you think.
Before you go there,
go ahead.
What's the main difference if you, on supplements, when you say these are supplements made by women, for women?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you saw like that's missing the mark, or what was the most overlooked items in the supplements that
I think a lot of it is clinical dosages is one of the things, the ingredients having clinical doses, and really looking at, when you can put an ingredient in, but to have the clinical dose, then you're going to have the scientific claims that you can make, especially here in Canada. We have NPNs, which thank goodness we do. I would never buy any supplements from anywhere else but in Canada, to be quite honest with you. We're very, very strict in our supplement guidelines, but really making sure that they have clinical doses. And also really the messaging behind the brand is this is no magic pill. And I'm very clear on that. And I always really struggled with that with the industry, is take this and everything's going to be better. What we really look at with the brand is we have a QR code on every single product that leads you to a complete program for you to start really making the necessary changes to have sustainable health and wellness in whatever area you're really struggling with. And I think that was the big part too. And creating more conversations for women regarding especially menopause. That's a big topic right now. Perimenopause, really getting the stigma away from it, being able to have these open conversations about how do we support ourselves besides supplementation, but with all facets, with the 5 pillars that we use.
So is there more of an emphasis or a realization of the role that hormones play for women in the supplements that are given?
Well, there's more conversation in the fact that it's not just a supplement, right? We really look at, for example, with our hormonal support product, when you scan the QR code, not only do you get 2 meal plans, vegan and non, but we also really go into the 4 phases of a woman's cycle, educating them kind of biohacking your cycle. When are you your most optimum self? When are you your best positioning to be presenting? When are you really being able to look at our cycles as more of a guide as to how we interact in the world and how we can utilize that to be our best selves day to day. And then we go everything from PMS. We talk about, our gut health. We talk about all these different facets that are really going to help find more hormonal balance. It's not just taking Reclaim, right? It's moving your body, having sweat, making sure you're going to the bathroom on a regular basis, all these different things, looking at the skincare products, makeup, cleaners that we're using in our household, taking a look at those as well for the xenoestrogens. So it's more of creating a conversation about the broader picture also. So it's looking at the supplement side of things, but then also what else can you do in your life to create more balance?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's go to, so if you had to choose the pillar most important to start with, is there one, or?
They are, I have them in order. Yeah. So it's the first one is the thoughts you think.
Okay. So
and the reason I say that is, you can take all the ashwagandha in the world, but if you are in a fear-based negative state of mind, and if that story or racket or whatever you want to call it in your head is a constant negative narrative, you're not going to be motivated to work out. You're not going to be motivated to take care of your body, to eat well, it's the most important thing. And that was something when I worked through my healing journey, I really had to, and I still have to use that. I use cognitive behavioral therapy a lot, but I had to really shift the way my mind thought about food, thought about exercise, right? So I think to me, that's always been the biggest thing. Because it was so interesting is that, every time we think a thought, our brain's releasing chemicals. And if you think a negative, self-depreciating thought, for example, it actually, your brain light almost dims, right? You create more cortisol, which is that stress hormone. You think positive, hopeful, optimistic thoughts, your body will create more serotonin, which is what you want, which so you look at how just important that one process is. And when I do my talks, I say to people, you might not be able to go home tonight and do a meal plan or start taking your products right away. But what you can do in this exact moment is anytime those thoughts show up, have a thought that combats it, right? That comes back with a positive thought. And it's like working out. And over time, it gets easier and easier and easier, so.
Mm-hmm. So the approach that you mostly use is cognitive therapy for the mental stuff. Like, do you do any sort of hypnotherapy or any of the unconscious stuff that we carry on without knowing that we
do? I mean, we try to be pretty, if I'm on it, to a surface level stuff. I mean, in the sense of really just paying attention to your thoughts. We have daily affirmations in every single one of the products. So we look at more of those type of things. I mean, obviously hypnotherapy and all those other things are fantastic, but we just kind of look at just the thoughts you're thinking. So we just kind of keep it a little bit more surface level for that one.
Yeah. But I mean, also, the journey, as you personally, is different for everyone, right? And so sometimes starting at something like, okay, deal with your thoughts, can lead you to go,
100%, 100%.
So you have to start somewhere. And it's less threatening.
Well, it's a little easier, I think, too, right? It's what's, when I and doing my talks, I always ask, what's one story or narrative that's been in your head that, and especially when it comes to weight loss, that's a big one for, I'm not good. I'll never lose the weight. I'm like, okay, well, if I never lose the weight, what does that leave you with? And then it's and what does that feeling give you? And what does that action give you? And so really being able to have people look at what that one thought really does for them achieving their goals or living their best life. Right. And so learning how to, okay, I'll never lose the weight. I'm happy and healthy where I'm at, and I want to be better, or whatever the thought is that you want to shift that to, right? And so really changing that narrative can then have a direct impact on them in their day-to-day. If they keep it up, it's like everything, you can go to the gym for one day and say, I haven't seen results. So you really have to keep working at it.
Yeah. And something within reach that you actually believe, right?
Yeah.
Like it, with thoughts, because sometimes if you impose this thing, I will be svelte and thin and, like a commercial, you're so disconnected from it that every cell in your body doesn't believe that is possible.
Very true.
Right?
Very, very true.
Yeah.
So that's so that's the first pillar, and that's
okay, great.
That's the first one.
And number two,
thoughts you think, the friends you keep, the support network we have around us, the people that are in our lives. One of the things I remember, if I think back to a lot of the talks I've given, and I was a trainer and a holistic nutritionalist for many years, working with people, was a lot of women, because I dealt with more women, would come to me and say, no, my husband just eats whatever he wants, and he's always bringing food home, and he's sabotaging me. Or, I go with my friends, and they all want to. And so I'm not saying you can't have those people in your life, but if you're really trying to have a goal of health and wellness, then surrounding yourself with people who are also on that same journey is really important as well. And I guess having boundaries with it, it's like having maybe a family member that's really super negative. Yes, you can still love them and see them occasionally, but you create a little bit more of a boundary, to protect you from the negativity. So really looking at the people that you have in your life, and are they people who uplift you and champion you and want the best for you? Or are they people that kind of suck your energy from you and aren't people who encourage you to be your best self? So I think that's a really important one. Thoughts you think, friends you keep. Moving your body every day. Doesn't have to be hardcore HIIT exercises in the gym. You can go for a walk. Walking is one of the best type of exercises, and you can do it with a friend. So you can hit off two of those pillars right there with one shot. But movement is really important, especially for women as we get older. We look at perimenopause, we look at going into menopause. Making sure you have that lean muscle tissue is really, really important, especially with weight bearing exercises and osteoporosis, and as our hormones start changing. So to me, a big thing is movement. I mean, I really encourage women to lift weights. I think that's really important, but movement that's the third one.
And what like walking, what works? in your experience?
Whatever works.
An hour, what is?
I think whatever you can do. I think it depends on where you're at. I mean, I go to the gym every morning at 5:30 and I'm there for an hour and I do cardio and I lift weights every day and I do spin 3 times. But I've been training since I was 16. This is just part of who I am, right?
Yeah.
And somebody who's starting out at a different point that's not going to be what they're going to want to do. Right. So if they can go for a walk for 30 minutes at the end of the day, if when they're sitting watching TV, do they have some little free weights or some bands? Can they do some bicep curls in between commercials? Right. Can they do some crunches? Can they do things that becomes so it's not so daunting that they don't want to do it and they give up on it? Right. Or pickleball. My mother plays pickleball like 4 times a week. She loves it. So finding something, if you don't like the gym, even a sport or activity that maybe you liked as a child, that you could do, swimming, whatever it is for you. And I think creating that relationship with movement where it's my opportunity to give thanks to the universe that I get to move this body today, that I exist, that I'm healthy, that I can wiggle my finger. I do this thing in my talks and I get everybody to hold their finger up and I'm like, like your brain tells your pinky to move before it moves. I mean, like that's really unbelievable. And we have to really start thriving and living in a space of how grateful we are for this body, because somebody right now would give anything to be able to do that. Right. And so we can get caught up on our own stuff and be like, I don't fit a size 10. Meh. But at the end of the day, you get to move and so using that as a way of giving thanks, right, is a big thing for me. I really had to shift that mentality, especially coming off of doing competitions where I'm training for 3-4 hours a day, to go down to even an hour a day. Some people are like, you train for an hour a day. I'm like, but I used to train for 4. So coming to that relationship for an hour for me and still appreciating and loving my body was work for me to get to that point. Right. So yeah.
Manon Bolliger here, and I want to thank you for taking actionable steps towards engaging your healing journey and helping others discover their path by watching, sharing, subscribing, and reviewing these podcasts. Every review and share helps spread the word, these different perspectives and choices and options for healing. And to thank you, I'd like to invite you to sign up to my free 7-sequence email tips on health and healing for everyday life. You can go to healerscafe.com tips. Thanks so much.
Yeah, that's the fourth one. No, third one.
Nutrition, I think, was your.
Yes, nutrition is my 4th. And the food we eat. I mean, I think when I do the perimenopause, I have a perimenopause talk that I'm doing quite a bit right now. And it I feel like I'm always like I'm repeating the exact same thing. You're moving, you drink your water, you need to, thoughts you think, and gut health and food. And it's kind of the same thing through every wellness talk that you give. It's all kind of the same stuff, right? We are what we eat, but we also are what we digest too. So that's another conversation, but really ensuring that you're having great food. And I think living by the 80-20 rule has enabled that for me. Really, 80% of the time, I eat really great food. And on weekends, if I want licorice and I want a glass of wine and I want to go out with my friends and have a great meal, I let myself do that. Weekends, what works for me, that's my 20%. And 20% for somebody else might look like a daily thing, having, a cookie at the end of the day, whatever it is for them. But I think anytime you land in restriction, and I've seen this over the years with like the keto movement. Keto is so big, and I did a lot of keto talks too. And even when I did keto talks, I really struggled with it. And I would say to the audience, anytime you restrict something so heavily, it's not sustainable. It's just not. Like some people, maybe like the percentage of people that can live that way 24, it's so minute. So finding a happy medium where that 80-20 rule, where you allow yourself some things, you're kind and compassionate to yourself, you're not at war with food, you're enjoying what you're eating, So nutrition definitely is number 4. And then 5th would be supplementation. And then that would be Aeryon Wellness. So, yeah.
So, no, it sounds like, it sounds a complete, starting point to be able to shift, where a person was stuck. But when you look back at your own struggle, how did you stop the bulimia, for example? How did you, like, I'm just trying to talk to, I've had plenty of patients, and it's, even though I understand fully the pillars and they make perfect sense, how do you get a person who's just going, this has got to come out of me, to make the leap of, whoa, I've got to look, and let me start with really straightforward, supportive, simple things I can manage and do, right?
I mean,
how do you bridge that?
Well, I mean, one of the things I did was I really reflected on, in my book, Bulimia to Balance, I go through exercises that I did. One of the biggest things I did is I began to look, the only time ever I didn't have episodes is when I was competing. And that's because it was so structured, and I operate very well in structure. A lot of the time with bulimia, it's not necessarily, it's an interesting relationship between control and loss of control. Because I am very in control of everything I do in my life. And the one time I would allow myself to just was when I would overeat and binge. And it was just this sense of relief where I could just lose control. And the second I would begin to realize, I was like, oh my God, my anxiety would kick in. I have to get control back. Right. And so, but when I began to look at when I never had that issue is when I was competing. So what I did was I took everything out of my house that was a trigger. I had no popcorn. I didn't make cake for years with my daughter because cake batter was a big thing for me. I still, at times, it's funny, if I'm making a cake and I start going, I can start going faster. I'm like, okay, I'll like put it away. Like I go for a walk, I come back, I change my state, as Tony Robbins would say. And so what I did was I started packing all my meals as I did when I was competing, and I made myself have my meals, because one of the things with binging and purging, or binging, if you're a binge eater, is the fact that you will not eat all day. And then you're like, but I just, have a little bit more, too much. And then before you know it, you're down the rabbit hole. So I really was conscious of making myself have these meals every day. Now, they weren't as restrictive, obviously, as I used to have when I was competing, because those were like no carbs at all. But that gave me some sense of control, which made me feel in control. And I began to slowly take back my workouts. Instead of doing I used to do 2 hours every day, just naturally. And I do longer than that when I was competing. But by taking that back by 15 minutes, like for me, not to do a 45-minute cardio session was a really big thing for me. It was really hard for me to pull back to 30 minutes and not be sprinting the whole entire time. So it was like, okay, let's try the elliptical. So really slowly taking my time with it. It took me a couple of years to come to a point. And I'm in a position I never thought I would be in. I never thought I'd have an okay relationship with food. I still do, Monday to Friday, I am pretty regimented in the sense of what I eat. I don't have cookies or cakes or anything like that. The weekend is when I'll relax a little bit, but I also don't go overboard anymore because I know I can have it if I really want it. So the big thing was packing my meals, taking every single trigger out of my house. If I felt I started to feel triggered, what I began to do was change the way that I looked at my bulimia, and I made bulimia my friend, because whenever I was in that state, feeling like I wanted to lose control, there was something going on. And that's why I was trying to lose control and get control, because something in my life wasn't in sync. And that's something I've had to shift that. Instead of looking at her, my little bulimic Aeryon, as this horrible thing that I'm battling, it was like, okay, she's showing up to tell me something. I'm not paying attention right now. And so when she shows up now and my anxiety shows up now, I'm like, okay, what am I not paying attention to? Am I not honoring something going on? Is there a personal relationship that I'm not paying attention to? And in business, am I not doing something with my daughter, whatever it may be? That's when she shows up for me. So I befriended her more than made her my enemy. And that was another big part of my,
I think those are both huge feats, like to understand aspects of your personality, that aspect of control, loss of control, and then to use that to your benefit, right? Like that's ingenious. I mean, it's really great to and the second part that you just shared now as well is to make friends with the little girl that you're representing as
well. And even with we have addiction in my family, and when my mom when I wrote the book, it was really therapeutic for both of us, but we had that conversation. And when I told her about the loss of control, and just feeling like I could take a breath when I did that, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, what have I done? And she never thought of it that way. And she's been a counselor for years. And she was like, I never thought about it that way. Like the control, losing control completely. She goes, I thought it was just more always wanting to be in control of food. She goes, but now I can see it was an utter loss of control.
Right.
And no matter what your addiction is, I mean, you can befriend it, like even alcoholism. If you're feeling that need to drink, there's something showing up for you that you're trying to resort to that, or drugs, or whatever the case may be, right? What's showing up for you in that moment that you are not honoring in yourself, that you're feeling that need, that anxiety to have something to, right? So, and looking at different tools in that. I mean, I still work out. So, and sometimes I think I've parlayed my little bit of anxiety into work because I love work so much. So I could overwork at times too. Yeah. So I can do that. But that was some of the big steps, and having the grace and compassion towards myself, that to know that I'm not perfect. And I mean, since that day in the bathroom with the mirror, was that the last time I ever binged and purged? No, but I can say it probably on a handful of my hand, like 5 times maybe since then. And that was over 10 years ago. Meanwhile, before it would get into these cycles of sometimes 2-3 times a day. And I didn't want to go out. I wouldn't go out for dinners with people. I didn't want to be out because I'd be scared that I'd eat something and be triggered and I'd want to get rid of it. So I was so kind of terrified. I kind of made it in my own little, so yeah. So and I think, so having the grace and compassion to be like, I'm human, having this really incredible human experience that is hard. Being human is hard. It's hard work, right? Trying to navigate everything. And so allowing myself grace if I mess up, and to jump back on and just carry on. Right. So.
Yeah. Very, thought provoking.
Yeah. I was going to say, I have a great mom, and we have a lot of conversations. And so she's been really instrumental in my growth as well. And we read a lot together and kind of go back and forth and have these discussions. And so, and I have that's the other thing too, is having people I can talk to who challenge me on different ideas as well. So for somebody who doesn't have a support network, that's another thing too, getting a support, somebody you can talk to without judgment, who will listen and hear and, and be compassionate with you. So I think that's something else. If you don't have that, then having that would be an important part of the healing journey.
Well, it helps a lot, because it's hard to sometimes become your own observer and be one step ahead. You can see what you've done in hindsight, but to actually feel it as it's about to happen and decide to change course lovingly.
Yeah.
Those are big challenges. And if you have people that love you, and challenge you,
yeah,
around, I think it certainly helps, yeah, but it's anyway, I find it very insightful, those 3 main points on the inside story of your experience with bulimia. I think the control and loss of control I've certainly seen in the people I've been able to help. But it's very thought provoking. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky a thing, because it's nobody knows what's going on. That's the other thing too. It's different with anorexia. You can be like, okay, this person's not eating. I can visually see what's happening. Bulimia, most people have no idea. And in fact, usually I was gaining weight because my body would absorb the calories either way. Right. So, and I knew this, but I would still just feel so triggered. I always wanted to fill myself up. So that's the other kind of hard part, is it's not a visual thing where somebody look like an alcoholic, like, hey, you're always drunk. There seems to be an issue. It's like, you wouldn't know. We're really good at it. We're really good at hoarding food. And if you live on your own, good luck ever finding out. I can go to drive-in all night long and nobody will ever know. Right. Yeah. So it really takes a lot of, my big catalyst, of course, was my daughter, Michaela, but it also was, I was just so sick and tired of it. I was so sick and tired of this continuous battle. And I remember just being like, is this ever going to end? Am I ever going to be okay with just eating a frigging cookie and not binging and losing control? Because I just couldn't trust myself. Yeah. And it's taken me, and I've had moments in this past couple of years where I'm like, wow, like I can have I can have a small piece of cake because cake's not my thing, and I don't all of a sudden feel that, oh, okay, we need to eat tons and get rid of it at all anymore. And I never thought it was possible. So I'm definitely here as a person who's on the other side to say it is possible, and it does take work, and it takes time, right? It's not an overnight thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned the trusting yourself, right? Because that's the thing, is you have to experience it a few times to go, okay, this big me can do this.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too I did was I didn't drink for about a year, because drinking would always lower my inhibitions to want to binge. That was something else too. So I was really conscious of, I can't drink, and I can't, and that's actually whenever I go through any life traumatic thing, if I break up with somebody I don't drink. Like, I just take a break from anything that makes me not 100% myself.
That's the control part, right?
Right. And that's a control part too, but I just know that it's not safe for me to be drinking and then be like, oh, I miss them. So, but with that, I was like, okay, there's no drinking. So I can be really conscious of all my decisions that I'm making. So there's no excuse like, oh, I had wine, so I was hungry. Right. So that was another thing as well. And journaling. I mean, there's so many things you can do, but yeah.
Great. So at this stage, back to your company, you have 500 stores.
We're in 500 stores and counting across Canada.
That's incredible.
Yeah, Whole Foods and Amazon and anywhere you go, we're launching 2 new products this month at CHFA. So I've been in the industry for 20 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an incredible ride, and I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. 100%. I know that every day I wake up and this is where I'm supposed to be in the world. So it's a really incredible feeling. It's scary at times because it's so much work and it's all me, and I've bootstrapped the whole thing, but I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do in the world. I know that for sure.
Okay. Well, it was wonderful getting to meet you and hearing the inside story and the whole story.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Manon Bolliger. Continue your healing journey by visiting thehealerscafe.com and her website, and discover how to listen to your body and reboot for optimal health.